Welcome, everybody. It's Dr. Doug Pernikoff and my special guest today, Marian Brickner. She's been both a guest and a co-host for me, so she's going to help out today. We'll talk a little bit about Marian and her photography in just a moment, but we're here with Dr. Doug's All Things Animal radio show, and we're going to have some subjects to talk about today. Of course, the biggest subject of the day is the Houston flood system and how it's impacting both pet animals and wild animals, and how you can help if you're interested. And we hope to have some phone calls that will bring some of those subjects together as well. Well, Marian, how you want to say hi to everybody?
Hi, Doug. Hi, friends.
And if you all remember from a past show, Marian is an amazing pet photographer and artist, in my mind. And I want you to go ahead and share your access, your www.
Oh, okay. The best way to actually reach me and have more fun and less typing is just put my name in Google, which is Marian, Marian, Brickner, Brickn, as in Nancy, ER.
You sure you spelled it right? I always wonder about that when I spell my own name. It's kind of different. Well, you know, everybody's been watching the news. It's an everyday event, and it's the most amazing flood, unfortunately, that any of us have ever seen. I just wiped out a big city, basically, and it's still going on. So the big concern, of course, are the human care, and I think there have been, I don't know how many, 30, 40 human deaths, something like that.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that they've just discovered so far. I know there's a lot of people that are misplaced because of their homes, and a lot of people don't even know where their relatives are. So I'm sure we're going to hear more and more bad news.
Some people, believe it or not, did not want to leave their homes.
Well, even I heard just the other day, it was the same thing. They just, first of all, don't imagine that it could ever be as bad as it became, right?
All right.
And some people don't have a way to go anywhere, so they don't even know that they have an opportunity to be rescued or escape someplace else. They just kind of sat still, and the waters just kept coming. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Really.
So I'm, interested in what's going on with the animal care as well. And recently, you see now, almost every picture I see with a news subject has people with their animals. It's not just the people, but they're grabbing their dogs and cats and trying to save. I've seen bunny rabbits. And of course, the ranchers are worried about their cattle and their horses. And then there's all the little wild critters as well. And everybody is suffering terribly. And I saw some really interesting pictures in the wild space. Besides all the little mammals and things, they have fire ants.
Fire ants?
They're very dangerous.
In Texas?
Oh, they're all over Texas. They're horrible. They were introduced many, many years ago, and I don't know if you've ever worked down in that area, but fire ants are really aggressive.
I'm familiar with fire ants.
Well, they also migrate tunnels underneath the ground, and they'll spread. It's almost like
why not?
Yeah, and but the neat thing is, it's neat, but it's kind of scary too. They're excellent survivalists. And if you see the pictures on the news or in the newspaper, it shows these big sheets of fire ants, because what they know to do is to create their own living raft. And you can't disrupt that raft. They'll attack you and bite and stuff like that. But you can see these large, rafts of fire ants floating around in this flood water. If it was me, I'd throw some alcohol on it or gasoline and burn them up, because there's only one way to get rid of those suckers.
Right.
But they cause a lot of destruction, a lot of pain. They cause a lot of damage to livestock, too.
Have you seen some fire ant situations?
Yeah, when I worked at
Houston?
not in Houston, but I worked at the Fort Worth Zoo for 5 years, and we had them everywhere. And it was always an issue, especially if you disrupt the leaves or whatever.
They must have a lot of adrenaline or something going on there, because they just don't want to quit.
No, insects are amazingly tolerant, and that's why when the rest of the mammal form are going to be gone on this earth one day, there'll be a whole bunch of insects just going, okay, now we got it the way we want it.
Yeah.
So that'll be funny. But, it's really, really crazy. I keep hearing all these different stories about the animals that are coming out, and there are a number of organizations, the Humane Society of the United States, there's Best Friends Animal Society, the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, and a number of other organizations that are down there in full force working to save as many animals as they can. And the only direction they can go is either to go to sister programs outside of the flood region and try and find space for these animals, or to ship them around the country. And that's all happening, by the good feelings and good wellness of other programs that are providing the money that's necessary. But I can't imagine how many animals we're going to find that had died through this. I heard that many animals were found just tied to their tree or whatever, and they were drowned. It was really kind of nasty.
What happens to the tunneling individuals, mice, rats?
They get washed out of their burrows, and the ones that don't get drowned probably find some kind of lifeguard kind of thing, or a floating piece of wood or something, and probably trap on. But, animals have evolved for thousands of years to survive. Humans, we've kind of made ourselves dependent on fixed sites and our own developments, assuming that those are forever. And I think the animals in the wild have a much better sense
What about roaches?
Well, I think roaches probably do great.
Really?
They probably love it. And just afterwards with all that
moisture.
moisture.
It's like Noah's Ark, for heaven's sake.
Well, that's what someone said in one of the articles I read, that they're waiting, the animals are waiting for the Ark to come, but I don't think it's coming. So it'll be interesting to see. And that also goes for people that are interested in donating. If you want to donate to these national organizations like the Humane Society of the U.S. or Wings of Rescue, or GoFundMe.com has a program for vet supplies, food, and other husbandry tools for pets, or the Best Friends Animal Society. All those are opportunities, and many, many more. You can probably just Google how to give and how to support, or you can talk to your own veterinarian or local people and see if you can find some local programs that are working hard to provide goodies. I talked to one of my friends who's a representative for one of the big pharma companies that does a lot of animal product, and they're shipping out tons of stuff, especially flea and tick materials, to these sites down there, so that these are the kind of products that are going to be necessary for the animals once life becomes a little more normalized.
Read a brief article about St. Louis was importing or rescuing, per this article, 121 or something.
Bringing them up here?
Bringing them up here, and what it said was they were emptying the cages, or whatever you call it, of the dogs that were already waiting for adoption, and bringing them up here to empty the space out to bring in other dogs. And they were looking, of course, for donations of towels and blankets. And so I said, well, what do they do when the dogs get here? What happens to them? Mm-hmm. Do you know what happens to them?
Well, what they'll do is they'll try and stabilize them medically, make sure that they don't have any particular problems that have to be attended to, wounds, or if they're acting sick, if they're starving, whatever's going on, they'll kind of get them stabilized. And then they'll get them into a holding facility, and then they'll make them available for adoption. They'll check those to see if the animals have microchips or something else that they can relocate them back to their owners. But I think in a lot of these cases, it's going to be tough.
God.
And especially once you displace them out of the state of Texas, you bring them to another state, it's going to be even harder to find them. But did you see some of the funny stories? They had one in particular, in the face of all this terrible stuff, there was a dog named Otis. It looked like a husky kind of dog, was walking down in the shallow floodwaters, and he was carrying his own bag of dog food. And that thing went viral, and it was pretty interesting, kind of fun to see. So, there's always something happy in a bad situation.
Yeah. Don't they have to get vaccinated or in some way find out that they're safe?
Yeah, because the water is going to spread, problems besides, just drowning. There's always a concern for a transmission of diseases. And especially these animals that get stressed, they're going to break with diseases. But there are things like leptospirosis is a waterborne bacteria that exposed to animals and humans can make us very, very sick. So that's just one example. But the other concerns might be, anything from exposure to wild animals that might be carrying rabies that are suddenly in human contact, whereas they weren't before. There's over 20 species of snake in the state of Texas, and about 5 of those, I think, are pretty poisonous, like rattlesnakes and water moccasins. So now people are going to have to deal with that. And, of course, there's gators all over southern Texas.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I heard of one private gator farm down there that lost over 250 gators that are now running free someplace.
Oh, yeah, they didn't lose them. They're just out there hanging out.
Well, there are natural populations, but there are also these guys. But, yeah, they said I think there were over 1,000 suspected alligators in that area. So, I mean, if you're going to go swimming, don't go naked because it's going to be scary.
Wow.
So,
wow. They could be floating right around in there.
I know.
Right
I would
around.
have fun, actually. I'd be out snake hunting, but that's me. So
Right.
anyway, so, keep your eyes open and see what you can do to try and help. And the more we can do, everybody can do something. And whatever is best for you, you should want to do. There are a lot of animals down there that are of concern in terms of endangered species, but they have whooping cranes that were almost hit in that area. They would have been wiped out. There's a wild chicken called the Atwater's prairie chicken. We used to work with them in the zoo. Those are also animals that were highly endangered and escaped these floods. But other things, like, for instance, it was interesting to find out that a lot of the free-tailed bat populations are already threatened because of diseases attacking them, and we need those because they pollinate plants and make life go.
Yeah.
But they found that a lot of them had been living under these bridges, like highway bridges and things. And now that the water came up, these animals were dying. They were getting washed out and drowned because they didn't know it was coming.
Oh,
So, we don't think about all those critters. We just think of the obvious dog and cat, but there's a lot of influence that's negative on the wild critters as well. So try and keep an open mind and be helpful where you can. So I was going to see, this was also kind of a nice lead into another subject that's related, and hopefully we'll get some phone calls in a few moments that'll talk about some of these subjects, but just pet loss in general.
Oh,
And,
right.
I know that we've all experienced it. If you have a pet, at some point, we're going to outlive the pet, and the pet is going to be gone. And we get lots of people that are dealing with this. Mm-hmm. Have you had that experience yourself?
I have. I had this wonderful dog named Tum, T-U-M. And it was in Greenville, Illinois, where I lived for a long time. Mm-hmm. And in those days, the dogs were allowed to just follow their kids around. And if I wanted to know where somebody was, I saw Tum sitting outside of the 5 and 10 cent store, and I knew.
One of your kids was there?
Yeah, I knew where they were. And there was a dog catcher person, drove around in a white dog catcher truck. And so Tum would run ahead of the dog and just get on our lawn, just as the truck pulled up, because they're not allowed to handle you on the lawn. They just face the truck and go, And the story about Tum was he left the house one day and we didn't see him for a few days, and then he was coming up Elm Street, sort of guiding 2 girl dogs up the street. And he ended up bringing them to the house. And we said, "No, I'm sorry, you can't come in." And he herded them off somewhere else. And Tum eventually, died. And he is now my password.
Oh, is he?
on almost everything.
Well, now we all know that, so we can get into your private, hack your software.
So yeah, everybody who has a animal companion or whatever we call those individuals who live in the bodies they happen to have and live in our homes, understand there's such a strong connection, and when that individual dies, it's very, very, very powerful grief. And I've even had people say to me, I wonder if there's really a difference between having your dog die and somebody's child die.
In some households it would be a real equivalency, but I always put humans first, but I love my pets. We have one pet in the house that's so popular with the whole family that we always threaten that when he goes, we're all going to take the juice and go with him. So, But, as a veterinarian, I have to deal with pet loss all the time. It's probably the reason my kids didn't want to become veterinarians, because they didn't want to deal with the loss. So I see people like you're describing that are just terribly in love with their pets, as I am. And when they think about losing a pet, they struggle with it. Number one, they struggle often because they don't want to be the one to make the final decision. They feel like, well, that's just not something I want to be. They don't want to play God. I try and explain to them that, the pet is there both for the pet's well-being, but also we bring pets into our home because of our own enjoyment of that relationship. And when the pet can't be comfortable anymore, and certainly when we think that it's suffering in some way, either emotionally or physically, then it's not the wrong decision. And it's very difficult for people to come up to that decision. There's probably lots of sites. I know of one called petloss.com, and they offer things like online grief counseling and a lot of things that you wouldn't think were, of interest. But again, people really go the whole route with this. So I wanted to talk a little bit when we get back from this break about some of the other aspects of pet loss and how we deal with it in the veterinary clinic with our clients, and what the clients are thinking and what the options are for them. But we're going to come back in just a moment with Marian and myself, Dr. Doug, and we'll see if we have some phone calls coming in as well. So Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show will be returning in just a moment, and thanks for listening.
He's a tramp, but they love him. Breaks a new heart every day. He's a tramp.
Welcome back, everybody. We're here at Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show, and I'm sitting here with Marian Brickner, my very special co-host and guest.
Hi there.
And we've been talking a little bit about the Houston catastrophe and how it impacts animals and pets as well as the humanoids. And now we moved into another area of interest, and that's just pet loss or pet death, and how people deal with that kind of relates to the events of today. And I believe we have some phone calls approaching, so why don't we see who's on the air? And
I am here.
Oh, hi. Who is this, please?
My name's Rose. How are you?
Pretty good, Rose. How are you doing? How can we help you?
I don't know if you can help me so much. I have questions about the Houston, about people who were having the dilemma of having to leave their pets behind, or staying or going for shelter.
And what's your point?
My point is, I would not leave my pets behind. If I had to choose to leave and take my pets, I would go. If I had to leave and not be able to take my pets, I don't think I'd leave. I'd stay.
Seriously? Well, that's quite a devotion, a level of devotion that's beyond. I think that we're seeing more and more.
A lot of people would be like that.
I'm sorry?
Don't you think a lot of people would be like that, not want to leave their pets behind?
Oh, I think most people wouldn't want to, but I mean, if it comes to life and death, I'm not sure what the choice would be. But I was we were talking earlier that a lot of the news media now is showing a lot of people that are leaving and being saved with their pets. But we did hear stories about animals that had to be abandoned and were left tied up and to a tree or something, and many of those animals have drowned. But it's a pretty difficult situation. So what kind of pets do you have that you would be so dedicated to that you would threaten your own existence?
My sugar gliders.
Okay. So sugar gliders, we had sugar gliders on a show one time, and they're those little critters from
Right.
Australia and that whole area, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And but I mean, at least those guys you could kind of pack up in your little bags and probably carry them pretty easily. But if you have like 10 dogs, it would be difficult to negotiate the movement of all those animals.
Right. Yeah, they would be a little bit easier to take, but on the other hand, depending on what the weather situation, taking them out and them getting wet, if you couldn't keep them dry, they wouldn't survive anyway.
I see.
It would be. I mean, what do you think? What's your opinion on that of sugar gliders? If you took them out like that in that situation, how difficult would it be to keep them dry and safe?
Well, I mean, there's a compromise there, obviously, because if they're stuck where they are in the house, they're going to have problems that are more serious. At least if you try and move them out and transport them, you have a better chance of survival, don't you think? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here.
So, Rose, how do you handle when you lose an animal, let's say from illness or something unexpected? How do you deal with it? How do you rationalize it, or how do you process your own thoughts and feelings?
If I've had a few animals that have died on me in the past few years. Okay, and my older pets, like my older dogs who died from old age. At that point, I was really sad. I was upset and sad, but on the other hand, I didn't want them to suffer, so I was okay with that.
Okay, so I mean, so you'd rather, in the case of a pet that is getting sicker and sicker and isn't responding to treatment that you're trying, would you choose to electively euthanize, or would you just expect to just let Mother Nature take its course?
I would electively euthanize rather than see them suffer.
Okay. Because as a veterinarian, I've had it both ways. I've had people that just say, well, I want to take the cat or the dog home or whatever it is, and I'd rather it just pass away at home. But I try and explain to them that, well, that's nice for you, but I don't know how nice that is for the critter. Because, again, you don't know what their kind of feelings they have and whether they're suffering in a painful way. So I always feel like it's best to relieve them of that misery and do it with graciousness. And I think the best way to do that is to elect euthanasia. Of course, it's a very personal decision. I never force anybody to do anything, but I kind of agree with you in that case.
Rose,
Right.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Marian.
Okay.
Hi, Rose.
Hi.
Hi. So, with this one dog that you're talking about, that you knew for a long time, right?
I had her for several years. Yes.
Right. And your communication, I'm sure, was excellent with her or him, right?
Yes.
So did you? And this is just a question. I'm just wondering. Did the two of you communicate in some way that she, was it a female or male?
She was a female. How did I kind of know that it was
right.
time for her to go? Because she went very quickly from being walking around, using the bathroom and eating, to laying around being lethargic, acting, wincing, like moaning when she was moving around. I could blatantly tell that she was in pain.
And often they'll stop eating and doing normal behaviors, and then you can decide, hey, I'm not going to watch my animal go through this.
Yeah.
Makes the decision process a lot easier.
Yeah, so as far as emotionally, as far as how I would feel about and how sad I was, I was very sad, but not overly upset, because I was more concerned about her not suffering.
Right.
I got you.
Yeah, understand.
Whereas I've had an animal pass unexpectedly, which was one of my sugar gliders that had gotten sick, and we had tried, actually Doug and I worked with me, try to keep her alive, and get her better, and we just couldn't. Mm-hmm. That was very upsetting.
Yeah, it always is.
Right. That one was really hard. I probably cried for a month.
Well,
but, it just depends.
We really appreciate your call, Rose, and I also appreciate your devotion and commitment to your pets. It's not uncommon for the type of pet owners I get to see, thankfully. When you see somebody who's not so responsible to those feelings, it makes you a little bit more angry. But best of luck with everything, and again, thanks for calling in.
Okay, well, thank you, Doug.
Okay. I think we have someone else on line 2. Hello. Who am I speaking with?
I'm sorry?
Who is this, please?
This is Kelly.
Hey, Kelly, this is Dr. Pernikoff and my good friend and co-host, Marian Brickner. We're
Hi,
here
Kelly.
on the radio show.
Hi, how are you?
Good. What can we help you with?
Well, the reason I was calling is I was just wondering if you had any suggestions where good places to donate to help any of the animals that might have been affected by the hurricane would be.
That's a good question, and we mentioned a little bit earlier, but you can check with your oh my God, what's that background? You can check with your local veterinarian or other groups that are in your area. Some of the specialty groups that are doing rescue might have programs together to try and donate. And then there are national programs like Humane Society of the United States, and we were talking about some other ones that, let me see, I had a list here of a few of them that are going and taking the lead down there in Houston. Wings of Rescue, Best Friends Animal Society. And
Like a lot of options.
I think if you get on Google, you're going to find tons of opportunities for that. But that's a neat thing to do, and every little bit helps.
Yeah. Great.
So,
Thanks for the suggestions.
are you a big pet owner yourself?
I am a big pet owner. I have lots of different things. So,
example.
I'm sympathetic to all the different. I have dogs. I have bearded dragon. I have chinchilla.
Oh, you do.
And birds.
You do have a cross.
Yeah,
So
I do.
How do you deal with animal loss as an individual? Can I ask you that?
How I deal with it? It's never easy, no matter how long you have them. It just kind of doesn't matter if you have them a short time and they die young, or you have them a long time and they die when they're old. It's never easy, and I don't know. I just try and remember them the best way I can, and
all the good
we still
times.
talk about them a lot. We keep some of their stuff around, and keep their pictures up.
Not unlike the loss of a family member.
It definitely is, yeah. So I know we kind of find the more we talk about them and remember them, the easier it is.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Like to keep their memory alive, because they're all special.
So, if you, I was asking another person this question, but is it easier for you to accept the loss of a pet if it's more gradual and it's coming, rather than if it's something very acute and unexpected? Which is easier for you as a pet owner?
I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's for the pet. Sometimes I think it's easier if they go quickly and you don't really have much time to think about it. But for us, I think it's a little bit easier if it's something you have a little more time to wrap your head around.
Yes,
although it's hard to watch them suffer. So I don't know. It's kind of 6 1/2 dozen of another, I think.
Yeah. Do you remember any special stories where you found a certain method to deal with it, or with a particular animal, or do you usually do these at home, or do you go to the veterinarian for your support?
I've done one at home, and she was my oldest dog, and she pretty much her body just gave out on her, so that was a hard one because we just pretty much had to decide that she was getting up there in age and she wasn't really sick, but she couldn't stand up, so we did have her done at home, and she was hard to take, but we knew she'd had a good long life and always been happy. My hardest one was we had one that he seemed fine when we went to bed, and by morning he was gone. He had hemangiosarcoma, and his heart burst. So,
that's a bad disease.
No warning. Yeah, Whoa. So that was, we had no idea anything was wrong, so that was a hard one to get over.
Well, that's a cancer cancer usually starts in the spleen, it goes up to the heart, and it can affect the valves of the heart and atrium of the heart, and then it can rupture out. You're right. And that's how they usually die. That's
that was the worst one. For him, I think it was pretty quick, but for us, it was the worst because we didn't have any time to wrap our minds around the idea that he was even sick. So
yeah, that's true.
But usually we just try and tell ourselves that we're doing the best thing we can, and unlike people, we're preventing them from suffering any more than they have to.
Right.
So
right. That's always
we kind of always go by that we'd rather let them go a day early than a day late.
Yes,
that's
I
great.
agree.
I don't think they really have any concept of time. I don't think they're thinking, I wish I had another week, or I wish I had another year. I think they're just happy when they are here, and you spoil them the last days they have, and
do what you can.
I think,
I have a question for you, Kelly.
Sure.
Hi again. So here's the question. So you're a sophisticated animal lover, take care of them and have a lot of them. When somebody dies, it doesn't stop you from getting another animal. Is that correct?
No, I never do. I know sometimes it's hard, and there's been times like when I lost my one suddenly to hemangiosarcoma, I didn't want another brindle male that looked like him right away. But we always usually get another one because, I don't know. I just think that they would, if they could tell you, I think that they would prefer that you gave a home to another animal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think for us, the pain of losing them is worth the enjoyment we get out of having them in our lives. So,
yeah, it's a terrible trade-off.
And other animals need a home too.
Exactly. And it's always a good thing to remember your pet by giving a home to a pet that doesn't have one.
That's a good point.
So,
well, Kelly, best of luck with you.
Well, thank you, and thanks for all your suggestions.
Okay, good.
I'll definitely get Googling.
Be strong.
So,
okay, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Kelly.
Bye-bye.
I think we have one more caller. Hello?
Hello?
Hi, who is this, please?
Ruben.
Oh, hi, Ruben. How can I help you?
Yeah, I have a couple of interesting questions. First of all, regarding the bats you were mentioning earlier in Houston, what's being done by the state, for example? Is there any NGO down there working? Because if that's as crucial as you're describing, like it's an endangered species,
Oh, I'm sure.
surely something's going on.
Yeah, I'm sure the conservation departments, I don't know exactly what the program actions are, but there's rescue programs. And conservation would probably be leading the way because they're going to be most responsible to those critters. And they're probably capturing them and relocating them out of safer areas. And as I mentioned earlier, the bat issue is pretty critical these days because they're dying from fungal infection that's killing many of them anyway. So when you get another a natural catastrophe like this, unexpected, it can negatively influence the remaining populations. And Texas is a haven for lots of bats. I think
It seems to me that that would be a great project for grad students or some of the other interested parties who are interested in this sort of conservation to really go down there and form an ad hoc group and go down there and do something.
It's a great idea, and I wouldn't be surprised that the local universities like out of Austin and such aren't doing just that for not only the bats but many of the other wildlife that are endangered. But it's a good point. I really appreciate that.
I have another question, kind of a philosophical one. Will you take it?
Sure, of course, we'll try.
So, there are different, it's a sort of philosophical, cultural question. There are different populations, different religions that feel differently about the human-animal bond. For example, the American people, Western cultures are generally pro-empathy, pro-animal human bond. And then you have Hindus, they worship animals and they have an intense bond, for example. Then you have Islam, for example, which discourages and has any bond between even just cats, dogs, notoriously dogs with them, and very little respect for animal life and not civilization. And what do you think that says about human? Well, Judaism also discourages any bond between animal and human. Mm-hmm. Dominion over the animals and all that. So, what do you think that says about the kind of human beings that acculturate around that issue? What does it say about us?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm not sure I'm sophisticated enough to answer it just completely. I can only speak from my own opinion. I feel like everybody has to make their own interpretation of that relationship, and I hope that formal religion doesn't guide us as human beings. I think as human beings, I would like to think that we work through this on our own and make our own specific decisions. I mean, I have trouble watching a good, healthy tree being cut down because to me that just seems, it does.
Right.
And the big question: do animals have souls? So you're probably going to get a lot of argument and discussion on that regard. I kind of tend to think they do, but so I'm probably one of those bunny huggers that you're talking about. So.
Well, yeah. Well, would you support the imposition of some international law to proscribe the treatment of animals, for example, in Sudan, what have you? And
there's no way in the world
like ritual animal sacrifice or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a tough one. I've worked in Southeast Asia a lot, and there's a lot of that kind of animal sacrifice as part of their religion, and I'm really not there in my mind to judge another culture. I'm here to kind of just observe and look and learn. And I think there's a basis for all these different beliefs and practices. And I feel like it's my job as a human to be open-minded and to accept a lot of variation and diversity and learn from it. There's something behind every story. We are going to take another break. And it was great. Some interesting callers. And we will be back with Dr. Doug's All Things Animal radio show. And Marian and I will continue the discussion of life and death in the pet world.
Right.
We'll be right back in just a moment.
Wish that I could travel his way. Wish that I could travel his way.
Welcome back. We're in segment 3 of Dr. Doug's All Things Animal radio show, and we've had some discussion regarding the terrible events of Houston and how that impacts not only the people but the animal life, pets and such. And my co-host and friend Marian Brickner has been helping me through that. And then we got into some phone calls and discussions about pet loss, and we're still on that subject a little bit. And Marian was just telling me a story about her brother, who was a physician, correct?
My brother, Phil Brickner, who was at St. Vincent's Hospital in New York. And he edited a long-term care journal for social workers and doctors and so forth and so forth. And he asked me to write and interview old people, that's 75 and up, to add a little light to the very sophisticated journal. First I said, well, I don't know how to write. And he said, well, don't worry, nobody reads it anyway. That was number one. So I decided to interview folks who had animals. And I interviewed about 15 individuals over the time period. And they all had an animal of some sort. And the question was, what happens when your animal dies? Consistently, this group of people said, someone else needs me. All my friends, or most of my friends, are dead. I'm older than everybody that I used to know. And somebody needs me. So I always get another animal. On the other hand, we all know people who say, I'm never going to get another animal because they're going to die, right? So it was interesting to me that this surviving group of people who were 75 to 99 that I interviewed had that particular personality trait.
No, I think this animal-human bond is amazing. Maybe it's more pronounced in our Western civilization. I'm sure it is, especially in the United States, and probably Europe and Australia. Those are probably pretty common thought processes. As a veterinarian, again, I deal with this every day, and one of the first questions I always get is, when is the right time to euthanize a pet? And I always begin by saying, look, I'm going to give you some direction and some concepts, but it really always comes down to a very personal decision. It's your pet, it's your family, it's your property, it's everything about you guys. And I tend to ask them to, certain situations, it's very obvious if the pet comes in and it's just literally, gone downhill, it's lost all its weight, it can't do anything, it's just sitting there barely living, then I think it's only fair and gracious to electively euthanize. But in many cases where it's a little bit more vague, or if you're dealing with a chronic disease situation that's just going to be more gradual, sometimes it has to be, unfortunately, a financial situation has to drive some of the answers, because if you can't afford to do the cost of the diagnostics and the workups or the hospitalization and care, it may be the best thing to make that choice on behalf of the animal. If you can't find a home for it, you can't put it into a rescue program, then I'd rather know for sure that we're going in one direction and we know that this animal has a chronic debilitating disease. I think it's fairest to go ahead and make that decision. But again, that's my personal opinion. Do you have any feelings about that?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay. Being particularly empathetic and sensitive to the feelings of others who may not be human being individuals, hasn't this translated to, my uncle is dying of such and such and such and such and such and such and such, and is never going to get better, and it's very expensive. What do you think? We just euthanize him. Has that conversation ever come up in your practice?
Not in any serious way, but certainly, and there are people, obviously, there was a Dr. Kevorkian, and his feeling was, that he was doing the right thing by helping people make that choice to stop. And that's a very, very difficult discussion, and it's a very controversial kind of discussion. Certainly, probably not. I'm not the best person to represent those issues, but I would say that it's not equivalent right now. It's not the same process. I believe as a veterinarian how important animals are, and I do believe that there's some soulful consideration here, but I still kind of feel like I'm first and foremost a human, so I separate, maintaining a human life seems to me to be really important. And it is also to keep the animals alive as long as they can be comfortable. And like I said, if they can maintain normal behaviors like appetite, and they can pee and poop and do everything they're supposed to do, and they seem to be comfortable and they're not making a big mess or cost impact on the household, then I'd say try and keep them alive.
Right. Well, let's just hope that Congress doesn't decide to pass a law against euthanasia for dogs or animals.
I don't think they will. I mean, I don't think that's on. Who knows? I mean, we have an interesting government these days, so I can never predict what's going to happen. Another question I get in the clinic is, okay, we've made that decision to euthanize. Now, should we stay with the animal during the process? And again, this becomes a very personal decision. And the way we do it, and every veterinarian probably does it a little bit different, but basically we want to do it in a manner that preserves the dignity of the animal and minimizes or mitigates any undue pain or unnecessary pain or discomfort. So we usually place a catheter into the animal's leg, and then we'll explain to the owners, if you want to be here, what we're going to do first is give a drug that will put them into an anesthetic sleep, and that's when they lose consciousness, and we feel that's the most humane way to do that. And then after, that's the time to say goodbye. So a lot of times people will stay through that process, and then once the animal relaxes into an anesthetic sleep, no longer conscious, then some people will stay, some people will walk out of the room. Those that stay will then go ahead and follow up with a drug that's going to overdose the heart, and the heart will stop, and that's it. And it's very, very rare that we see any kind of response from the animal like discomfort or pain. And I think, again, that's the most gracious way I know how to do that. And some people, like I said, are determined to be there the whole time. I've even had people that ask to permission to hold the animal while we make the injections. And again, having a vein open with a catheter really makes this the right way, and it works.
I happen to have been invited to photograph this process.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for a couple of people. There are some vets who are willing to go into somebody's home and do that process there. Wonderful, wonderful.
We do that too.
Concerned people.
On occasion, yeah.
It's a powerful, powerful experience.
Yeah, a lot of people like to know that the end is going to occur at their home, and this is going to be the most comfortable space for their animal. Then the question is, what do you do with the remains?
Right.
And most veterinarians, again, are going to offer a number of options, but you'd be surprised what people will do on behalf of their pets. So we have some people that just want ashes. They just want to have a cremation. They don't want the ashes returned. They're happy to say goodbye right there in the office. We have other people who want ashes returned, but they want to have an opportunity to kind of disperse them in some sort of ceremonial goodbye. So we just put them in a box and send them on their way home, and the families do that. They find a special place in their life where this animal would have a good space for resting. And then we even have people in programs that will allow for a formal burial, even with, in some cases, a formal tombhead. What's it called?
Tombstone.
Tombstone. And so there's all options available, and especially in our St. Louis Metroplex, we have all these wonderful programs that are available to support the people. But a lot of them walk away and they wonder, how am I supposed to feel? Is it okay that I have a lot of guilt? Should I have guilt? I had one client I remember that made a proper decision in my mind to euthanize an animal. But again, as I mentioned earlier, I always try and tell them, don't look back, only think about the good memories and look forward. But this particular person decided that she made the wrong decision, and she was drowning herself in guilt and bad feelings, and there was nothing I could do to correct her. I just tried to make her work through it, and over time I guess she got better, but it was a big trauma for her.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so
How did that happen?
well, I just think that she wasn't comfortable with the decision at any point and finally made it, and maybe she was being pressured by family. I don't remember specifically, but once a decision's made, it's made. It's a one-way trip. So, but again, never look back. Make your decision, go forward, and know you do it out of good conscience and that you're trying to do something good for the animal, and that's relieve pain and take away the discomfort. So when people come in and they just want to electively euthanize, I've turned people away.
Really?
It's kind of weird. At the end of the year, the New Year's, they want to clean house sometimes. I swear. I remember this one clinic I worked at, and the end of the year was coming, and I think animals that have chronic disorders that are not life-threatening, but they're more of a cost and nuisance kind of thing, maybe really bad chronic ear infections that cost them money all the time. There were people that just decided, hey, I want to clean house. It's a new year. I want all this mess out. I want to start over. And that's a hard one to swallow as a veterinarian, because our professional oath is to keep animals alive at all cost and do the best we can.
Well, wow.
I don't know what to say to that.
Oh my gosh.
So, those are the things. And then the other obvious question real quickly is, well, do I get another pet, or when do I get another pet? And that really depends on your family situation. If you got a bunch of young kids, sometimes the best thing to do is to get right back on the pony and get a new pet. And it kind of allows them to transfer that love and feeling for the pet that they lost back to this new pet.
It sounds sensible to me.
I think it's a good thing. So we're going to take a break, and we'll come back to our final section, and kind of a tough couple of discussions today with Houston and now this pet loss subject, but they're kind of related. And Marian and I'll be back, and we'll finish up our segment for this show, and maybe introduce some activities that are ongoing with pets coming up soon. So Dr. Doug Pernikoff, Marian Brickner, Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show. We'll be back in just a moment. We're at our final segment. This is our recap segment for Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show. And as mentioned several times now, Marian Brickner, my co-host and friend and special guest today, has helped me get through some of the topics. We started out talking about the events of Houston, and not only the impact on the human world, but more importantly for our discussion, we talked about how pets are surviving through this, and those that are and those that aren't, and what that means to us as people. And then also what the influence of the wild population, the wild animals, they're also being challenged with these great floods and stuff, the things that nobody ever expected. Although, like I said, the wild animals tend to have the ability to sense changes in climate things that are going on, and they probably start heading for high ground sooner than humans understand they should. So that's part of the story. Then we talked about pet loss more specifically, and how I deal with it in the veterinary clinic with our clients, and how people talk about their feelings. And we had some special guests call in, and we got a perspectives that we understand, and they're all over the chart. But mostly people consider their pets as part of their family, and of course they want to treat them accordingly. And I wanted to give, Marian had a few pet events that are coming up that she'd like to share with the community. So Marian, go ahead and take it away.
Well, I, of course, looked at Google to see what was going on this weekend. And there was a very interesting, fun stuff that goes on with a game called Barn Hunt. So there may be some barn hunt dogs out here in the audience. At Purina, the 3rd, there's a barn hunt event from 8 a.m. to 1. And for those of you who haven't seen that, it's a big bundle of hay that's stacked around in a certain way, and 5 or 6 rats in a circle-y, what is that thing they can breathe through?
Oh, yeah.
That are placed in, and these are our family friend rats, so they're all safe and happy. And they're tubes, and they're placed hidden in the little sections of this hay. And the individual, who happens to be a dog, is let in with her person, or his person, and has so many minutes or a section, a minute or 2 minutes or a minute and a half, it's a timed event, to find the right number of
rats?
rats.
Yeah. Oh, so that's where, again?
And that's at Purina, and there's several contests going on from 8 to 1 on the 3rd.
Any other events you want to mention?
That's the biggest one, because at Purina there's some other events too, but the barn hunt is specifically fun because
it's a family activity.
I've seen it definitely. I've seen a lot of it, and the dogs have a wonderful time.
Oh, that sounds great. Thanks for that information. And thank you for joining us and filling in for me. It was great. And hopefully we'll be doing some other projects together soon. And if anybody's looking for our wonderful normal co-host, I don't know if she's normal, but Cindy Vickers is off today. But you can reach her for training support at my clinic at 636-530-1808, the same number that you can reach me, Dr. Doug. And if you're looking for some special pet photography, what's that contact again, Marian?
Oh, just Google me, Marian Brickner, Brickner.
There you go.
All right.
And we appreciate everybody listening, and let's keep our eyes open and try and help where we can when it comes to Houston and all the flooding. And I want to thank you for visiting with us at Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Bye.
And we know Flipper lives in a world full of